Hey guys, how's it going? So guess what? I don't like Star Wars Rogue One. And I have been thinking about this topic since the movie came out. It's just... Okay, I've been a Star Wars fan my entire life. One of my earliest memories was my dad sitting me and my younger brothers down to watch the original Star Wars films on VHS, which I think we got from a Blockbuster or something, some video place down the street. Now with that, you may be expecting me to say something like, Star Wars changed my life, and it's a big part of me, which isn't accurate, honestly. I've been a fan of it. I love the movies. I love Darth Vader. I had a whole bunch of lightsabers when I was a kid to whack my brothers with. And we owned a slew of Star Wars related video games, from Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 to Pod Racer to Battlefield to... We owned a lot of Star Wars games. There's just a lot of Star Wars games out there. But with all of this, Star Wars was for me just a brand. I don't hold it on some lofty pedestal like it's the end-all be-all of cinema. Which is why when I see people hold a mediocre film like Rogue One up like it's one of the greatest movies of 2017, I have to wonder whether people are really judging it based on it as a movie or the branding and familiar characters that are just shoved into it. Rogue One is why I'm talking to you today, and that's because it's an utter mess. There are so many pandering moments, disgusting scene-to-scene editing, and an inability for the movie to focus on our main characters. Now, spoiler alert, this breakdown of Rogue One is going to have a lot of spoilers about Rogue One, which... you should probably figure that when you click on a video like this, but you know, I'm going to give you a warning anyway, so here it is. We start with that familiar title, A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away, and then are immediately thrust into the action. We see a ship from the Galactic Empire landing on a desolate-looking planet as a family hurries together their things and escape. The father, Jalen Erso, seems content to give himself up to them so that his wife and daughter can escape. He goes out and meets with the leading officer, Krennic, who tells him that the Empire needs his help and that he has no choice but to come with them. Meanwhile, his wife is leading their daughter to safety until a stupid idea gets in her head. You know how my husband is surrounded by elite stormtroopers and I'm obviously an untrained civilian who should be trying to get my daughter to safety? Yeah, to heck with that, I'm just gonna go try and shoot one guy and get killed to manufacture stakes. This was the first sign to me that this was gonna be a bumpy ride. This is literally 2 minutes into the movie and characters are doing colossally stupid things like this. What was her goal here? Okay, so maybe you kill Krennic, then what? You still either get shot or captured. And if you hadn't gone in, you may have been able to, like, I don't know, raise your daughter. Even if you don't have your husband, you'd still have her. Is that really such a horrible life? But the writers needed to kill her off to give their main character, the daughter, Jyn Erso, some sort of tragic backstory. Watching your mother die just sounded too good for them, and this was the best scenario they could think of. From here, we see Jyn run away and get rescued by Saw Gerrera, and then boom, we see the title of the movie appear on screen, and then boom, time skip, she's in prison. Wow, guys, didn't that blow your socks off? No? Well, get ready, because it's about to get worse. We then cut to introduce Cassian, our male lead, getting some information about an Imperial pilot who has defected. Then shooting his informant after he shoots some stormtroopers to establish that he's a gritty, cold-blooded rebel who will do anything for the cause. Bam, cut to Jeddah, where you see the pilot babbling about needing to see Saw Gerrera.
So you Saw Gerrera? Saw Gerrera? Now I need to speak to Saw Gerrera. What part of urgent message do you guys not understand?
I'm so glad this scene is just him babbling. I feel so useful. I'm so glad they put this in the movie. Bam, let's cut back to Jyn in a prison transfer, I guess? Rebels swoop in, free her, and then she attacks them because we gotta show that she's a rebel even though the rebel's in a fucking super rebel. She gets taken down easily and then captured. Next scene, Yavin 4. Y'all remember Yavin 4? It's back and Yavin as ever, this time with Mon Mothma. Remember Mon Mothma? Here we see the rebels talking to Jyn. Yo, Saw Gerrera was like your friend and he has this guy we need. Go talk to them so we can find your dad and you'll be set free. And she's like, yeah, fine, whatever. We also get a little scene where Cassian talks to his supervisor who tells him when Jyn's father is found, they have to kill him because he is super dangerous and shit. Bam, cut back to the pilot meeting Saw Gerrera, this guy who's being old and crazy. Saul seems skeptical of him. Bam, to the Imperials. Did you think that last scene should have been resolved? Well, too bad. Now we got Krennic talking to a bad CGI Grand Moff Tarkin, who really should have just been an actor who looked like Peter Cushing instead of just trying to recreate Peter Cushing. Makeup costs a lot less than paying a team to rig and render his face, but you know, whatever. He tells Krennic that people are getting tired of his shit, so they're gonna go to Jeddah where they know the pilot is and test their weapon. Then we get a previously in this movie scene where the movie reminds us the opening scene that happened literally 15 minutes ago. Thank you for reminding me, movie. Then Jyn and Cassian land on Jeddah. Back to Saw Gerrera, we see that he has a tentacle monster that reads minds to tell if the pilot is lying. Why did they separate this scene from the other? It's like a minute long and feels completely out of place because we then just go straight back to Jyn and Cassian, who are still on Jeddah and run into Saul's gang ambushing the Empire. Jin also makes friends with a blind badass named Chirrut and his friend with a big gun named Baze, who all get captured and taken to Saw Gerrera's hideout. This is the first 25 minutes of the film, and it's just a bunch of pasted scenes that are just kind of pushed together with no real emotion or flow or like point between them. There are so many bad choices, but we're going to get to that more when I talk about editing. Now after that, the scenes start to level out a bit. It's still not really great, but it's better than more cohesive than what we had before. From there, they learn there's a flaw in the Death Star from the hologram the pilot brought from Jin's dad, but they don't know what the flaw is. The Empire gets to Jedha and uses the Death Star on low power in hopes that it will kill the pilot and his message. The gang escapes except for Saw Gerrera, whose feet just feel tired, so he decides to just die. Like, he doesn't even try to escape, which is the second time they did something really lazy to kill off a character. The pilot, who we find out is named Bodhi, tells them where they can find Jaylen. So they go to the secret base where he's held, and Cassian tries to follow his orders and kill Jaylen, but then he just doesn't because that would make Jin sad, and he's like, just met her, so yeah, he's a real cold-hearted killer there. But some rebels accidentally kill Jaylen with their bombs, so whoop-de-doo on that. Toss in a generic scene where Jin has her dad die in her arms, because that needs to be in like every movie. So they go back to Yavin 4, say they gotta find the Death Star plans, and no one believes them. So they get a group together and do it themselves, and a whole bunch of battle stuff happens, but we'll get to that later. There's a good amount of detail I glossed over here, like one scene with Darth Vader when he shows up and he says, "Yo, remember me?" Yeah, okay, see you at the end of the movie. Then he's at the end of the movie for what I can only describe as pure pandering, so that the movie ends on a good note with people and they think they liked it, when really they just got some weird joy out of seeing Vader slice people up. Now, since I'm on Vader, his appearance in this movie is just pure fan service. It detracted from the movie and really undercut our main villain, Krennic, who acts like a whiny child in front of Vader asking, "Am I still in command?" Who thought it was a good idea to make the main villain a sniveling Imperial underling that you saw Vader kill left and right in Empire Strikes Back? Also, Vader's castle is so stupid. Like, I've heard it was originally designed for The Empire Strikes Back, but it just comes off as so forced. Look how cool Vader is with his castle straight out of a metal album cover. He's got a fucking lava waterfall. Isn't he so cool? Don't you love Darth Vader? Okay. Let's talk about the editing. Editing is one of the most important aspects of a film. A director can shoot the most beautiful scenes, an actor can give the performance of their life, but this means nothing without an editor that can put together these scenes and bring out the beauty of all of their work. This is a prime example of film with atrocious scene-to-scene editing. Now, I'm not going to go around pointing fingers because I think it's hard to do that behind closed doors. It's obvious that there was a lot of studio meddling in what was going on here, and it's obvious that Disney was a little uncomfortable with this movie because they did demand reshoots, and you see a lot of footage that was used in trailers was not used in the actual movie. But what happens when you have bad scene-to-scene editing is you lose a lot of emotion and feeling that the film is trying to convey. Let's bring up an example I mentioned earlier. Jin and Cassian land on Jedha. They talk about their plans, and then the movie cuts away to a really weird scene of Saw Gerrera and his tentacle monster, then goes right back to Jin. This interrupts and takes away from our lead characters to focus on just a really weird scene. A scene that is absolutely unnecessary and would have been better used to, I don't know, establish our main characters. At this point, and really at no point, do they really provide much strong characterization, and this choppy editing really doesn't help with that. But beyond the editing, there is just the scenes they are cutting to, many of which are complete wastes of time. Like, if I had to rewrite this, the first thing I would do is scrap all scenes of the pilot before Cassian and the gang meet him at Saul's hideout. The scenes they do have with him just feel like time filler in a movie that just really needed a lot more time to tell its story and build up its lead characters. Maybe you could argue they established Saul, but I think it's better with just the small things you hear the rebels say about him going too far and him being a radical. And by seeing how reckless his forces are by attacking the Imperials in town around a whole bunch of civilians. That tells you all you need to know about him before his scenes with Jin. Then there's the cold open, an interesting idea. The mother dying in the scene is still incredibly dumb, but overall it isn't that bad. In my opinion, it would better serve the movie if this backstory was revealed a little later in the film. Give it some mystery why Jin is motivated to help the rebellion when her father is clearly important to the Empire. Maybe Cassian and Jin, who have been at each other's throats the entire movie, finally have a heart-to-heart and understand where each other is coming from, reveal their own backstories, and that's where we see this scene. That would give the characters a connection to each other. It would help the audience feel and understand what's going on. We would be hearing this for the first time, finally understanding what has motivated Jin, why she's doing all this, what her backstory is, because finding that out at the beginning is kind of boring. In fact, it doesn't have to be just Jin and Cassian. Get Chirrut, Baze, and Bodhi the pilot all together and have them share their stories about what the Empire has done to them. Have them all relate to each other and understand what evil the Empire really is. Have this moment steal their resolve so that they really understand that they cannot let the Empire have this destructive weapon like the Death Star no matter what. That they finally understand that they have to work together and sacrifice everything they can to stop this evil from controlling the universe. In this way, we would understand them, feel connection to them, want to root for them, hope they succeed, and feel this dread and pain when we see them eventually all die. Because, spoiler alert, every single main character dies in this movie. And comforting knowing that their mission and their sacrifice was not in vain. You know, I just touched on the ending, and I think it's time we talk about that. What the fuck was that? At the end of Rogue One, we have all other members of the gang dead. Krennic, the villain, is laying on the communication tower dying, and Jyn and Cassian are on the beach where they see the Death Star fire a small blast like the one on Jedha. And in their cut, Krennic is immediately killed by the blast while Jyn and Cassian hug and disappear into the white light of the blast together. This is the tragic death of our characters who risked everything to get these plans to save the universe, and should signify the end of this story. Nah, because then it goes up to the space battle between the Empire and the Rebellion. Darth Vader shows up to fangasm all over the place. Then there's an awful, terrible CGI Leia that caps the movie off talking about hope, because the next movie is The New Hope, guys. Do you get it? Also, seriously, how hard is makeup? Come on, guys. There was such an obviously better way to end this film than a fucking fangasm. Do you want to know how you end this movie? Well, let me tell you. Okay, so in my version, you have Cassian and Jyn sending the plans up and leaving Krennic to die. No more cuts to space. That side of the story is done. Stick with our heroes hobbling to the beach and laying down in the smoldering battlefield, looking up and seeing a faint outline of ships fighting, a battle that is so crucial to their mission, but one they can no longer influence. The battle is not their story anymore, and they realize at this point that their story only has one ending. Then maybe they'll talk about some of the happy moments they share as they see the inevitable blast hit the planet far from them. As they talk, show the remains of their friends scattered across the island, show the aftermath of the battle. Cut to Krennic, not immediately killed by the blast, but watching as the weapon he was so proud of will be his eventual doom. Of course, in my version, he won't be a villain undercut by fan service characters that take away all of his power. In my version, you have him as a strong, commanding leader who has always gotten his way, and hint at officers like Tarkin wanting to get rid of him as he poses a threat to their position because he's competent, not because he's incompetent. So when we cut to them, he is a man who has been soundly beaten, brought to his knees when he's been in control nearly the entire film. See the rage at the Empire that has betrayed him and at himself for his failure, the fear at the death that is coming towards him, and maybe a perverse sense of pride of what he's able to accomplish. Back to Jyn and Cassian, and they're laying back in the sand as the white light draws closer. One of them will hang their heads in despair as the other taps him on the shoulder and smiles. Cut to Krennic dying, his death looking miserable and sad as he's swallowed up by the light. Back to the beach where the light will overtake them, but they both have a smile on their face, knowing that they did all they could, and even though they don't know the result, that their mission was a success. Boom, go to credits. The ending of a film about sacrifice for a cause should not be in an embarrassingly pandering fight scene, but rather on the dignified deaths of our main characters who we spent the entire movie following. This film is their story. It follows them, what they accomplish, what they sacrifice to pull off this amazing feat. But the movie at the end pretends it's not. It just shows their deaths and it's like, yeah, that happened. Okay, now we're gonna go up and we're gonna see Darth Vader, guys! You remember Darth Vader? I cannot stress enough how bad that was. Like, it's so embarrassingly tacked on and people praise it like it's fucking genius. It reminds me a lot of Yoda fighting at the end of Attack on the Clones. I remember coming out of the theater thinking, man, that was so cool. That was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. But I was fucking 9 and stupid. Now, to be fair, this is not the worst Star Wars movie ever. That title still is held by Attack of the Clones, which is just a boring, terrible, awful movie. The action in Rogue One, and mainly the last battle scene, are pulled off so incredibly well. Some of the action scenes on Jedha were a bit shaky to me. I don't really like them that much, but that ending battle scene is no fucking joke. I really like the director Gareth Edwards' last film for a lot of the similar reasons. He's able to show off scale and a sense of weight to the explosions and mayhem. They do some really cool things with the space battle as well, but fun action does not excuse poor characters and a mediocre plot. Action is the icing on the cake of a good movie, and in this case, the icing is really good, but the cake is burnt and overcooked, removing all texture and flavor. There were other small nitpicks I could make, such as the tone being a bit wonky, as it felt like they were going for a dark war film. Then they had this quippy kind of humor that was seen in The Force Awakens and a lot of Marvel movies. This particular brand of humor can be pretty funny. I had some good laughs out of The Force Awakens, and Marvel pulls it off really well, but it just does not fit with the feeling of this movie at all. It's like someone wrote out the script and then someone else came in and was like, this won't do, we need to toss in some jokes in there. Such as when Chirrut the blind man asks why it's necessary to blindfold him when he's already blind. That's a funny line and was executed pretty well, but it threw off the overall tone of the movie, making it seem a bit goofy. At this moment in the movie, we should be feeling nervous for our characters as they're being captured by some radical rebels that they shot and killed a few of. But the movie decides to cut all the tension and have this joke in there. Now, goofy would have been fine if it was the tone of the overall movie, but as I've said, every main character dies at the end. That's not a fun action-adventure movie where like one character may die and we'll have a sad moment. This is every single character dies. That's a war movie. That's a dark, kind of more serious tone of movie. And having like this witty kind of like goofy comedy before that is weird. It's a really weird choice. All right. Okay. I think I'm done. No, wait. I got one more. You remember that one scene on Jedha? If you saw the movie, do you remember that one scene on Jedha where they run into the guy that was in the bar in A New Hope? Yeah, what the fuck was up with that? Did anyone really feel like that was a good use of the movie's time? I mean, fuck, Disney. Could you just stop pandering for like 10 seconds and focus on making a solid movie? I don't need to be reminded about things that I've seen in other movies when I'm trying to watch a new movie. It could be a new thing. It could be different. This should not be that hard. Come on now. All right, I'm done. Rogue One is not awful. It's not great. It's really, really far from great. It has a lot of problems, but it's not awful. It's unfocused, messy, doesn't develop its main characters, and spends large chunks of the film pandering to established fans. The action is really good, but that's no way to judge a movie on its own. Maybe for films like The Ray Redemption or John Wick, but that's an entirely different story that someday I would actually really want to talk about why that works for those movies and not for this movie, but I don't really have the time to do that today. In time, I feel like people will turn on Rogue One. It will get to that point where people will realize that it really just isn't that good. The same thing happened with the prequels when they came out. I'm old enough to remember that. People now talk about the prequels as one of the worst tragedies in cinema or act like they're the worst movies ever. Back when they came out, people enjoyed them. The sales for those were pretty damn high. People back then didn't think they were better than the original trilogy, but people liked them. They thought they were just, they were a good time. Honestly, I don't think it was till Red Letter Media's Mystery of Plinken reviews that people really grasped how bad they were. Regardless of if or when public opinion changes on Rogue One, these are my opinions, these are my thoughts on this movie. Yeah, it was a mess. Thank you very much for watching, and peace out.
We've been doing this for so long, and yet it's come to this. We feel you've been treating us wrong, yet you sit there and insist.